Illinois might be a lost cause. People are leaving the state in droves, and there doesn't seem to be a plan to combat that. But despite the mass exodus of residents, the state does still get a few newcomers. Not many, but some. I'm guessing those people are moving for their job or they have family in the land of Lincoln. For those people, there are certain parts of the state that you want to avoid at all costs. Here are the 9 places in Illinois you should never move to. Springfield is the state capital, so one would think that the city would be kept in decent shape, but that is not the case. Oh, there are parts of the city that try to be decent for the tourists, like Abraham Lincoln's old neighborhood and the area surrounding the capital, but you'll find homeless people getting into fights and begging for money in that area. At least, that's what I saw when I last visited Springfield. Despite the fact that the state government is the largest employer in this area, they have a lower than average household income at $54,648. As a result, they have a high poverty rate. It's 18.6%. That's higher than the state and national averages, and it affects more women than men in this city. In addition to being the government hub for the state, Springfield is also a college town, so education is another dominant industry. It might be due to so many college kids coming to town and renting apartments, or it may be that a lot of people are struggling financially, but 1/3 of the homes in Springfield are occupied by renters, and that's with homes being reasonably priced. The average home price is $133,400. If all of that isn't bad enough, this is a fairly dangerous city. The violent crime rate is 105% above the national average, and the property crime rate is 110% above the average. This is a city of 114,230, but the last data released by the FBI listed 9 murders, 888 other violent crimes, and 5,080 property crimes. The chance of being a victim of a crime is 1 in 20, making Springfield safer than only 4% of other U.S. cities. If you want to work for the state government or another Springfield employer, do yourself a favor and find a home in a nearby town instead, like maybe Chatham. Centerville is a place where I can't find one single positive about living there. I can usually find at least one thing to offset all of the horrible things, but this one has me stumped. Centerville is one of the poorest places in the country. The median household income is only $18,955, and that's despite being across the river from St. Louis where jobs can be located. The number 1 industry in this community is listed as accommodation and food services, so I'm assuming that there are a lot of minimum wage workers in Centerville. Hotels and fast food joints aren't known for paying their employees any more than they absolutely have to. Because of the low wages, 45.6% of the people live below the poverty line. Females are affected significantly more than males, but that's due to the fact that there is a rather large disparity between the number of women to men. For every 100 women over the age of 18, there are only 77 men. I don't know for sure why that is, but I'm thinking the men from here might be in prison because crime is out of control. This is a town of only 5,446, but they had 38 violent crimes, including 1 homicide, and 236 property crimes. That means that the violent crime rate is 103% above the national average, and the property crime rate is 127% above the average. That means that the chance of being a victim of a crime is 1 in 18, and Centerville is safer than only 4% of U.S. cities. I feel bad for every person who has the misfortune of being born in this area. It's really hard to change your circumstances when you don't have any money. Alton is a good place for a history buff to visit and explore, but I wouldn't recommend this town to anyone looking for a home in Illinois. This is a riverside city, so it was a trading town in the 1800s. Its close proximity to St. Louis made it an important part of the Underground Railroad. Abolitionists could sneak escaped slaves from Missouri, which was considered a southern state, over the river to Illinois, a free state. This was also the setting of one of the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and it was home to the world's tallest man. Monuments and historical sites can be found all over the town. You can find Victorian Queen Anne-style homes from back when the town was prosperous, but today a large segment of the population is struggling. The average home value now is only $79,900, so you don't find many people building giant homes, and out of the residences in this community, only 59.6% are occupied by the homeowner. It's really hard to buy a house when you're broke. 26.6% of the residents fall below the poverty line. The median household income is only $40,211. When you have an area with a low average income, you usually find a high crime rate, and that's no different for Alton. This is a city of 26,208, but they reported 268 violent crimes, including 2 murders, and 1,101 property crimes. That makes their violent crime rate 168% above the national average, and their property crime rate 98% above the national average. The chance of being a victim of a crime is 1 in 20, and Alton is safer than only 3% of US cities. Like Centerville, this town also has a population that is comprised of more women than men. For every 100 women over the age of 18, there are only 83 men. Maybe it's just a coincidence that Alton was the site of the first penitentiary built in Illinois. Rockford seems to be having an identity crisis. Either that, or there are just quite a few delusional people in that city. I've been reading reviews from people who live there, and mixed in with the usual comments about how Rockford is a dangerous place to be, there are some who think it's just a great city. There doesn't seem to be an in-between reaction. I think the funniest review was the one that said, "Living in Rockford is like living in Nazi Germany in 1945, enjoy the ruins." Based on all of the stats, I'm going to say that person is probably closer to the mark than those who think that Rockford is nice. For one thing, there are a lot of poor people in this area. 22.3% of the people are living below the poverty line. That's because the median household income is only $44,252. The largest industry in Rockford is manufacturing. Unfortunately, factory jobs are no longer as well paid as they were just a few decades ago. Adding to that is that the third largest industry is in retail sales, and those types of positions are usually minimum wage or a small commission, so no one is getting rich from doing that. This is one of the largest cities in Illinois, with a population of 145,609, so it would be expected that they would have a higher number of crimes reported, but Rockford is an overachiever in this department. They reported 1,711 violent crimes, including 14 murders, making the violent crime rate 209% higher than the national average. They reported 4,848 property crimes, so that's 58% higher than the average. The chance of being a victim of a crime is 1 in 23, so Rockford is safer than only 4% of other US cities. If none of that deters you, housing is affordable. The average home price is only $91,600. Peoria was once associated with vaudeville, opera, and the arts. Today, however, Peoria is known more for its crime and a waning economy. 19.7% of the city's 110,417 residents live below the poverty line. The three largest industries in Peoria are healthcare, manufacturing, and retail. The median household income is $51,771. As with most of the other communities on this list, the women in Peoria outnumber the men. For every 100 women, there are only 85 men. The crime is also out of control. They reported 1,158 violent crimes, including 25 murders, so their violent crime rate is 175% above the national average. They had 4,160 property crimes, so that's 78% above the average. Peoria is safer than only 3% of US cities, and the chance of being a victim of a crime is 1 in 21. However, if a person needs to live in this area, home prices are cheaper than the state average at $125,700. Centralia was once a mining community, but an explosion in 1947 that killed 111 miners was the beginning of the end of that industry. Today, the three most prevalent industries are healthcare, manufacturing, and retail. As a result, the median household income is only $37,675, and 22.8% of the townspeople live below the poverty line. Due to the low wages, homeownership is below average, with 65% of the homes being occupied by the homeowner. The average home price is $69,400. Centralia has significantly more crime than one would expect from a town of 12,210 people. They reported 181 violent crimes, including 2 murders, so their violent crime rate is 288% above the national average. They had 570 property crimes occur, making the property crime rate 120% above the national average. Centralia is safer than only 1% of US cities, and the chance of being a victim is 1 in 17. Mount Vernon doesn't have much going for it. It's a small town of only 14,723, so you won't find much in the way of entertainment. Despite the small size, which is usually indicative of a safe area, Mount Vernon has an insanely high crime rate. Violent crimes are 281% higher than the national average. They reported 3 murders, as well as 211 other violent crimes, such as assaults. Property crimes are 134% higher than the national average. They reported 731 property crimes, including 21 vehicle thefts, which seems high to me for a town this size. The chance of being a victim of a crime is 1 in 16, and Mount Vernon is safer than only 1% of other US cities. Most people move to small cities and towns to get away from crime, so I don't know why anyone would want to step foot in this place. I've been there a few times for work seminars, and it was scary. If that isn't bad enough, people who live there probably aren't doing as well as they could financially. The median household income is only $40,625, so 22.2% of the residents live below the poverty line. As with several of the communities on this list, the three largest industries in Mount Vernon are healthcare, manufacturing, and retail, so the low income and high poverty isn't much of a surprise. As a result, homeownership is below average. Only 59.4% of the homes are occupied by the homeowner, even though the average price of a home is only $78,600. Danville had the dubious honor of making headlines last year for having a new synthetic opioid making the rounds, and that pretty much sums up the type of city that it is. It's depressing, filled with crime, and falling apart. The violent crime rate in Danville is 361% higher than the national average. They reported 536 violent crimes, including 7 murders. The property crime rate is 112% above the national average. They reported 1,370 property crimes. This is with a population of 30,479. During the last decade, they have lost 7.7% of their population, so people are getting out of this area when they can. The chance of being a victim of a crime is 1 in 17. Danville is safer than only 2% of U.S. cities. I knew someone who moved to Danville and she turned up murdered, so I definitely don't recommend this place. If the crime doesn't deter a person, perhaps the lack of opportunities would. The median household income is only $36,172, so 29.4% of the people fall below the poverty line. Just like the other terrible places on this list, the main industries in Danville are healthcare, manufacturing, and retail. Only 55.9% of the households are occupied by the homeowner. Normally, I would chalk that up to the low wages, but maybe the other 44.1% are just smart enough to not put down permanent roots there. For those who do, they can expect an average home price of $66,700. There are 10,246 people living in Sauk Village, and I don't know why. 31.8% of them live below the poverty line. The median household income is only $38,788, so there isn't much of an opportunity to get ahead in life. The main industries in this community are in healthcare, transportation and warehousing, and manufacturing. The crime in this area is confusing to me. Property crimes are 4% above the national average, but violent crimes are 1,346% above the national average. They reported 566 violent crimes, including 2 murders and 490 assaults, and 227 property crimes. So that makes it sound like if you leave the keys in your car, it probably won't get stolen, but if you sit in your car, you might get attacked. Those stats make little sense to me. The chance of being a victim of a crime is 1 in 14, and Sauk Village is safer than 5% of US cities. I'm sure there are some people from Illinois who are wondering why Decatur and East St. Louis weren't mentioned, because they're often cited as being horrible places in the state, but believe it or not, they actually have less crime than the 9 communities on this list. Surprising, I know. I wouldn't recommend anyone live in either of those places either, for what it's worth, but I didn't want to bore you by making this even longer. If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and hit the like button. If you really liked it, consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I remain stuck in the cornfield.